Hey there everyone, this is Victor with VictorVectorJKU. We're back in the garage and today I'm going to be working on making a end cap mount for my Smittybilt air compressor. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Alright guys, so this has been a project on my mind for a little while now, and I've been trying to figure out how exactly do I want to go about mounting my Smittybilt air compressor inside of the back of my Jeep. So typically what I have is I have my spare tire running right here, and it'll take up this space kind of just on the inside of the wheel well. And then on the other side, I have all my tools that I keep in my rigid containers, and so that's what I have sitting over there. And I was thinking, okay, I kind of have this dead space right over the wheel well. And you see a lot of products out there, they have different like MOLLE attachment points, and then they have some bin storage as well. But I wanted to do something a little bit different than that, and I wanted to make myself my own bracket that'd be able to mount my Smittybilt compressor. So I was kind of looking at, figuring out how can I mount it so it's kind of right in this position right here, utilizing basically the factory hardware that's already installed in the Jeep, and trying to make that work for me. So the areas that I'm looking at is using this bolt here for the striker latch reinforcement, and then also where the plastic trim goes back here. So I'm planning on using those two. And then since I have the 40% delete for the rear seat, there is one of the seat mounts that's available underneath my cargo platform system that I created and installed myself, kind of mocked up after the goose gear system. And so I know that I have a bolt there, so my thought is to pull up from that, but then I also do have some modular bolt holes that I put into the floor structure itself so that I could then make mounts off of it. So I have one that's right here, and I might end up actually using that instead. But basically, so my thought is I'm going to be using this bolt here, I'm going to be using the bolt here, and then I'll probably tie up over here. What is my strategy? What do I want to make this look like? So honestly, I don't really know, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some cardboard and make some mock-up templates. And I've already started going through this, and so what I've come up with is this little shape right here. So basically I have the hole mocked up where this bolt's going to be coming through. And I started off with just sort of putting that into place, figuring out, okay, where's this going to land? How tight do I want it to the body on this side? And I decided I'm going to make it really tight to this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend down the edges on this outside edge, because what I picked up was some bar stock of 1/8 inch steel that is 8 inches wide, and I have them in approximately 5-foot lengths. So 8 inches is longer than what the wheel well closeout is here, and I don't want that metal to be coming to a sharp edge or extending beyond it. So what I'm going to do, what I ended up figuring out, is about 7 inches is how deep it'll be, and then I'm going to bend this flap down, and I'm going to bend here and also in the front. That way it makes just a nice smooth surface that you don't have to worry about. If you ever bang into it, you're not going to catch a potentially jagged or sharp surface. It'll be a nice rolled edge, and I think it's going to clean it up. It's going to add a little bit of strength to the bracket that I'm going to be mounting. And then where I land on this front bolt is this sheet will be just above it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld a little gusset on the back side here. I'll drill a hole in it, and that's what will be installed there. Then from there, basically just going to be figuring out the mounting holes in the bracket, be able to mount this guy up, in addition to dropping a gusset that's going to come down and tie in off of the floor structure here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this over to the table, transfer my template that I've created, and start cutting that guy up. Okay guys, so you can see that I have my template now transferred over to my bar stock. And you can see the dashed line represents where my bends are going to be. And the solid lines are going to represent all of my cuts that I need to make. A couple things I did in addition to cutting out the profile. So obviously I cut the edge and I put in the notches for where the bends are going to be. I also then grooved the material along where the bends are going to be, because I don't have a break that's going to be sufficient to be able to bend this material. It is 1/8 inch, which isn't too thick, but I don't have the tools necessary to do that. So what I'm doing is putting a stress relief into the material that will help guide the bends and enable it to bend a little bit straighter and a little bit easier for me. And then what I'm going to do afterwards, I'm just going to come back, I'm going to run a bead of weld through there, and I'm going to grind it smooth so it fills in that void that I've created. I've also come around the corners here, here, and here, and I just sort of rounded those off so it gives a little bit nicer and a more finished look. Next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and figure out how I want to bend these and get them bent. Alright guys, so what I got here is a 6-inch vise, and what I'm going to be doing is basically just setting my material in, tightening it down, and then approximately bending to the 90 degrees that I want. I think because it's going to be the most difficult, I'm going to bend this medium-sized edge here, the one at an angle. I'm going to bend this guy first. So, to show you guys what I did here, basically what I did was I put the top of the vise, the jaw of the vise, right to the bottom edge of where my groove is, and I'm just going to be basically folding this guy over. So I'm starting to try to bend this, and it's pretty tough to bend. One thing that I've done in the past is I'll use some adjustable crescent wrenches, and I'll go ahead and put that on there, and that gives you a little bit more leverage to work with. And since I already have my groove, it should focus the bend where that material relief is. Alright, I think that's right about 90 degrees right there. So, that guy's set. So you can see how that bend turned out right there. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the short end next. Now one thing I'm going to point out here that I made a mistake of, I'm not going to be able to bend it because I'm going to interfere with this, so I need to push this all the way out to the edge. And then from there, I'll be able to bend it now. Alright, there we go. Now you can see there's a little bit more of a gap here than what I want, but that's alright. What I'll do is I'll be able to fill that in with a little bit of weld. I'll just have to bridge the gap a little bit. So next up is this long one. This one's going to be a bit tougher because obviously there's a lot more surface to have to bend. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to start on one end, and I'm going to have to shimmy this over as I go and do little bends at a time. So let's go ahead and take a look at it real quick. So, that is it. I think it turned out pretty good so far. It's not perfectly straight, but it's pretty darn good. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look and see how this guy looks so far. So, he is approximately going to be sitting right here. So, I mean, it's all turning out pretty good so far. I'm really happy with where the bend is and everything else. So the next step is figuring out what I need for a template to be cut for where this bolt's going to go. So I already went through and kind of taped it out and cut my piece that's going to be fitting in here. So I now know what that gusset needs to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this guy out of some steel. Alright, so I have my little bracket that I'm going to be putting right here. So I have him cut out, all in place. I still need to go and drill the hole for this guy. And also there's two little ribs here, so that's the reason why I have this little recess. So this guy will sit right there, and then the top piece will be able to sit right on top, and it shouldn't interfere with this other rib. Now, since I'm about to drill this guy, I also wanted to mark this guy where this hole needs to be. So what I actually did was I put some of this security check paint marker on the top of the bolt. And from there what I did was I basically brought my bracket in, figured out where he needed to be placed, and then set him down nice and gently on top. And that was able to give me my marking right here. So that identifies where that hole needs to be drilled. So I could use the cardboard template that I made, but I'm a little bit concerned if that is completely accurate, and it's also kind of a little bit large of a hole. So I wasn't too confident with it. So this way I should be very accurate, and I'll drill this guy a little bit oversized. That way I have some freedom in case it needs to move a little bit. So you can see on the underside, I have the bracket right here welded up. I also put in a little gusset here, give it a little extra strength. Otherwise, I came through and I welded all of the corners where I bent. This little area here I burnt through, so I ended up having to kind of build it up, and I'm going to grind that all smooth. But I'm going to basically come over and grind all of these welds smooth. But I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. That gave me a good amount of surface that I'll be able to now grind, and it'll look like it was a clean bent edge. Alright, so I finished up grinding all the edges, so everything's smooth. It's bolted in place, so I have the one bolt up here, and then I also have the bolt right in here as well. So where it sits right now, it is actually pretty sturdy. Alright, so next what I'm working on is the bracket that's going to be supporting between the tray back to the floor system. So what I did was I first set this angle finder to 0 based on the width of the platform, just to kind of get myself at 0. And right now I'm at about 2.2 degrees, and that's a declination on this side. So what I needed to do is raise it up a little bit. But based on what I'm seeing with how the shelf is bent, that everything's sitting flat back here, so I don't want to bring it out of whack too much. So what I did was I went ahead and I'm measuring basically from the platform up, and I'm just a little bit under 11 inches. So if I raise it up to just at 11 inches, I'm only about 0.5 degrees off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do 11 inches tall, and then I'm looking at about 3 inches in depth from the side of the tub where the wheel well is till where I hit my bolt. So that should be sufficient, and I don't want to overhang too much to where this little cutout is. Alright, so what I'm going to be using for the brace is a 2.5 inch bar stock that is 1/8 inch in thickness. So what I've already done is I've marked my 14 inches in addition to an extra 1.5 inches. So this little piece is just going to be a strap that's going to be welded behind just to give a little bit extra reinforcement in addition to the butt weld. And then I have my 3-inch bend mark here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my stretch relief cut and then make these 2 cuts and get to bending. Alright, so I just wrapped up bending the support bracket, and you can see that I actually had to add in a couple more bends than I had planned. So I added in this little bend right here because the tub right in that same spot has one of these little bosses that comes out, and either it would kick out or it'd have to be angled kind of backwards, and I didn't really like that. So I thought it turned out pretty clean, just putting in, so it would be a 90 and then it would be straight up, do a slight bend back, and then bend it back straight, and it lines up really clean back up to the top. And so yeah, so next up what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting this little bracket behind there just to give support, so there's addition to the butt weld that I'm going to be doing across. And then I just got to drill the hole. I'm probably going to chamfer these 2 corners just to make it look clean, and then just got to clean up any of the welds afterwards. So we're getting close. Alright, so we just finished up welding and grinding the welds, at least on the outside surface, smooth. Main reason for this is because I'm going to be having my spare tire in here, and I don't want to be rubbing it across a weld. I want it to be as smooth of a surface as I possibly can. I wanted to have the edge bent for the face, along with having everything smooth coming down, so I think this is all going to work out pretty good. So next up, everything's bolted in and basically in final place. Now I'm gonna go ahead and place my air compressor up here and bring my spare tire in, make sure everything looks and fits right, and then judge where I want to drill the mounting pattern for the air compressor. All right, so this is basically how it's going to finish up looking. So I have my spare tire, it'll be strapped, and then I'll have access from the front to the air compressor. And there's good clearance around the side of the tire here. So everything actually looks pretty nice. Not worried about any potential rubs or anything. And then I have access to my power button right here, really easy. And then likewise, if I'm running my soft top, I'll be able to easily just pop off the window and I can access it from right here as well. Okay, so we finished painting the compressor shelf and the paint is dry now. So we are ready to go ahead and start the install for this guy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna first start off with installing the compressor down to the holes that I have drilled in this, because it's a lot easier to access top and bottom right now with the tray out of the Jeep versus when it's in, there's gonna be really tight clearances. I removed the compressor from the portable base and I've taken the fasteners with the isolators that install this to the portable base. I've removed those and that's what I'm going to be reinstalling onto here. So these fasteners, they have a bolt, a washer, a sleeve with an isolator, and another isolator that goes underneath. So what's going to happen is this is going to feed through the mounting hole of the compressor. This will then go underneath that and in between the tray, and I'll bolt through the bottom. That, we are all bolted down and we are ready to go ahead and take this guy and throw him into the Jeep. Alright, so a couple things I want to cover really quick before I bring in the tray with the compressor. So I reinstalled the carpet back in here. Now there were a couple things I had to do to make it so it would work. So I had to cut out a little section of the carpet right here to be able to access the bolt for the latch reinforcement, since that's one of my mounting patterns. I also, where the rib is right here on the backside of the carpet, I actually had to remove the insulation from the backside so that the bracket can fit more firmly up against it, since I made it a nice tight fit. Otherwise, everything else with the carpet remained the same. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring him in and start installing him. So what I intend on doing, I'm going to run the electrical up through this hole here since there's a little bit of room, and then I'm going to run him back along the rest of the routing all the way back. And I actually brought my leads that are running up to the battery up through the grommet back here. It goes down to the tail light. So that's where I actually brought my power through, and I have a couple of connectors set up that I'll be able to make those connections. So I'm going to do that before I bolt this down, so in case I have to do anything with removing the carpet, it'll be easier before. Alright, so I have my harness routed, connected, and now I'm ready to go ahead and start bolting this guy on in. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with installing all the fasteners just loosely. That way if there's any misalignments, I'm not going to run into issues when I try to install one of the fasteners. Alright, with all of them in, I can go and tighten them down. And then as I go, there's a few areas. I know there's the harness that runs right here, making sure that I'm not going to pinch that guy when I install this bolt. There we go. And that is it. So that is the bracket all bolted down. And then the last thing I got to do is just reinstall the plastic trim back here. So I'm going to first make sure that these guys are out of the way. Now, if you're familiar with the plastic trim in the back of the JKU, this screw here is used to actually hold down the plastic trim. I did have to do a couple of modifications, which included removing the bracket that did tie in right there, so I had to pull that off, as well as I had to also cut a little bit more of a relief so that it would fit around this new bracket. But I'm still able to use the two push-in features to attach this panel. And with that, it still fits just as good as I intend to have it fit, and it gives a nice clean finish around the edges. And then just have to bring in the last little trim piece. And that wraps up the Smittybilt compressor tray above the wheel well on the driver's side. So I gotta say, I am pretty excited about having this here now. Before, I had it in a rigid toolbox on the passenger side that was basically the bottom bin, and every time after finishing up a day of wheeling, or if I had to get to my air compressor, I'd have to pull the two bins that are on top of it out. I'd have to unstrap it because that's how I keep my tools and everything secured, and it would just be a real cumbersome pain to get to. Now it is just right here all the time. I don't have to access it with any tools or anything. It's just going to be sitting here ready for me whenever I need it. Just got to flip the power switch and good to go. So now a future project that I'm going to be working on here is I'm actually going to be switching this out to a standard chuck versus the sort of Smittybilt proprietary fittings. But yeah, so that's going to wrap up the video for today on the DIY fabrication and install of the Smittybilt compressor tray above the wheel well in my 2015 JKU Willys Vector. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, definitely hit the thumbs up button for me. If you guys have any questions, comments, or any other feedback you want to provide me, please drop those in the comments below. And then do me a favor, if you guys are enjoying the content, please help me grow my channel by sharing that, as well as subscribing to my channel. Otherwise, we are VictorVectorJKU, and we're taking on this build and the trail, both direction and magnitude. Alright guys, have a good one. Catch you next time.